bankers,
yes.
the banksters, and like Bankster Rat. Bankster Rat started out as just a little rat, but over the 7 years, thanks to central bank policies, he's a monster rat. He's going to become even a bigger monster rat because these central bankers reward what I would, without any compunction, refer to as financial terrorism.
We've all talked about that. We know it's financial terrorism, but let's talk about what this guy has said, Richard Fisher.
Yes.
So you're talking about Bankster Rat, where this is like that pizza rat in New York,
yes.
grabbing somebody's food and bringing it into his little cave below to save for the future. Well, what the Bankster Rats have done the opposite. Bankism, central banks, Richard Fisher, Stanley Fisher, all these guys running the central bank, they've front-loaded, as he said, front-loaded. That means the future's gonna have to pay. You could draw forward, you could put everything on your credit card, you could act like you could draw forward your income for the next 5 years by spending it all today on a credit card. But that means you don't have income for the next 5 years because it all has to go towards your credit card.
Front load equals back consequence.
Yeah, future consequence. So there's always going to be a consequence. However, with CNBC, just like those North Korean news presenters who are reading about their mighty exploits and all this sort of stuff, a lot of financial press came to believe, especially since it worked over and over, all the way down from 20% interest rates down to 0%. It always worked when the central bank did this. So they began to believe that, yes, our central banks are mighty and they can control markets. So here we turn back to Richard Fisher. I'm going to start a little bit with his clip at the very end where he talks about the only thing that in the past year that has returned anything has been cash. And then look at the response from the CNBC correspondent.
The only asset that really returned anything last year, again, if you take away dividends, believe it or not, was cash. It's 0.1%.
Yes.
That's a very unusual circumstance.
This is, Mr. Fisher, this has been an absolutely extraordinary interview. For you to come on here and for you to say I was one of the central bankers who engineered the front loading of the banks. We did it to create a wealth effect. And then to go on and tell us with a big smile on your face that we're overpriced, which was the word that you used in the market, that there would be some digestive problems. Are you guys going to take the rap if there is a serious correction in this market? Will you equally come on and say, I'm really sorry, we overinflated the market, which is a logical conclusion from what you've said so far in this interview?
All right, so here you have a mea culpa. They admit, like what I've been saying all along, that this money printing was just a giveaway, that it didn't work, it didn't have the effect. It was, in fact, didn't cause any inflation, and it was a complete catastrophic loss.
But let's look at the fact what we're talking about here is the propaganda. This CNBC guy for the last 10 years has believed that the central banks can control markets. We here on the Kaiser Report have been telling you over and over that this is not going to work, that this is a Ponzi scheme, that this is just front-loading.
Right, the propaganda was that this money printing would cause inflation to create enough tax revenue to pay down all the debt.
Yeah.
But and then Paul Krugman of the New York Times, for example, would say, we need to print more money because you need to create that inflation to pay down the debt. Now, is Paul Krugman of the New York Times going to come out and publicly apologize for being a charlatan? The guy who has been supporting Fisher just basically stabbed Krugman in the back and said, this guy Krugman's been lying to you for 7 years. He's a charlatan. And that all we've been doing has been front-loading. That is to say, we've been bailing out our friends, and it's been a catastrophe, and now we don't care.
We've been front-loading, meaning somebody in the future is going to pay for it. Not only that, but the past year, 2015, has been the most remarkable in terms of the expansion of central bank balance sheets from the U.S. to the European Central Bank to the Bank of Japan. They've expanded their balance sheets. Bank of Japan has gone bonsai. They've gone crazy. They've gone bonkers. They've expanded their balance sheet enormously in the past year. And yet, the thing that returned the most, as Richard Fisher said, was cash at 0.1%, which is remarkable. And yet, over and over, and you see that in the comments on our YouTube version of this show, you'll see people say, you were wrong, the Fed is in control, the Fed is mighty, the Fed is as powerful as Kim Jong-un in controlling...
Right, the propaganda is so effective that these people that are getting stabbed by this guy like Fisher, they believe the propaganda. This is the power of propaganda. It's central bank propaganda.
It's
people don't understand that central bankers
but it also causes misallocation of wealth, because here a lot of people, whether it's that CNBC presenter or people leaving comments in this video or people allocating capital for their their future, they think this can go on. But the Fed is knowing, while they're doing this, that it's just front-loading. It's drawing forward your future income. So you think, however, you don't know this. You don't know that most ordinary people don't understand that this means for the next 5 years, your income is going to be down. And this is what he says in the entire interview. It's like that this is basically we're going to have to not grow for the next 5 years.
Right. Well, they said that we're going to bypass, we're going to go around the law.
Yeah.
We're going to break all the laws because we need to do that to jumpstart the economy, to front load the economy. Well, it failed. But we still have all the law breaking. There's been no rule of law. And then you have an economy and a society in America where this front loading has created this enormous wealth and income gap, given rise to social unrest, given rise to groups like Black Lives Matter that have a legitimate beef because their lives have been destroyed by the likes of Fisher.
There has been natural law. Natural law will always happen because markets will always rebalance. They could, create dams and try to contain all the damage, but it's always going to fall apart. Now, I want to talk to another accidental truthiness. Because Richard Fisher tried to draw it back, saying, "Well, I didn't vote for this when this British guy."
Like the firing squad guy who says, "Well, my gun was blank."
So here in the UK, there was an accidental Freudian sort of slip by the Prime Minister during PMQs, and his Freudian slip was tweeted word for word by the Conservative Party on Twitter. And then they all had to erase this because what the Prime Minister said is, as ITV pointed out, PM's embarrassing gaffe in Parliament is tweeted word for word by his own press office. Here's his tweet. "Since I became PM, income equality has fallen. It went up under Labour." So they tweeted this accidental. This is the truth. This is caused partly by the government's austerity and fiscal policies, but what is the larger thing is the bankism, is the central banks, is the front loading.
He's been a party to financial fraud. But what does the news here cover? They covered the fact that their little British astronaut up in space soiled himself, apparently, or
I hadn't heard this.
he pooped in his spacesuit or something, and that was the big story in Britain. Not that the fact that the Prime Minister has been financing terrorism. No, that's not the story, believe it or not. Here in the UK, it's about space poop. Well, it's the most hermetically sealed propaganda bubble in the world is the United Kingdom, more so than North Korea. If you can,
Exactly.
It's unbelievable, but it's true.
So here North Korea sets off an H-bomb allegedly, or some sort of nuclear bomb. They issue statements saying this is grand, this is great, this is not a catastrophe. It is a catastrophe. Just like in the Fed or the ECB or the Bank of Japan, they set off nuclear financial bombs and say it's great thing for us.
All right, well, in the second half, we're talking with Dan Collins about China and North Korea. I'm looking forward to it. He's great. Thank you.
Boom! That's a Stacey